This is one of the richest countries in the world, but the problem is the wealth is located in a handful of large corporations and a few thousand very, very wealthy people. The stock exchange in the last 6 months, during the pandemic, increased in value by £630 billion. The 1,000 richest people in our country, since the bankers' crash, increased their wealth by £400 billion. There's almost £1 trillion in unspent liquidity, corporate liquidity, in the banks. There is a large amount of wealth in our country available. The problem is it's held in a very few hands.
Hi, I'm Joshua Foster, and next to me is Jobe Doherty. Joining us tonight is the former Lord President of the Council, former Labour Party National Campaign Coordinator, former Shadow Business Secretary, current Labour MP and member of the Socialist campaign Group, the Right Honourable Jon Trickett MP. Aside from the long introduction, hi John, how are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm good, yeah, I'm very good. Looking forward to you interrogating me, but I hope you go gentle.
We've all got lovely hearts. Right. So it's great to have you here. We've been anticipating this for quite a while, actually. And
Great.
So to have you here is lovely. So I'll start with my first question. Given the state of the world at the minute, whether that be politically, economically, or socially, do you think that the way the world is going, that socialism will be almost an inevitability in the 21st century as we go on?
I'd love to think that was the case. I always thought that was the case. But you know, there's a socialist who was actually assassinated because of her politics, Rosa Luxemburg, many years ago, even before I was born, and that was a long time ago. And she said it's either socialism or barbarism. And I know what she means. She's obviously thinking about the First World War and, you know, the conflicts that went on at that time. When you think about it, though, you know, the planet's in a mess, the economy's in the mess. We've got the problems with COVID and all the other issues facing us. It's not impossible to envisage, which a friend of mine wrote, a very great socialist. He said it's now more possible for most people to imagine the end of our planet than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. And I thought that's quite an interesting thing to say. So our job is to persuade people that there is another way. There is another way of managing our planet, our country, you know, our economy across the world and all the rest of it. We have to convince people, because what capitalism does, it gets in your head, it gets in your mind. It's there to kind of persuade you there is no alternative. You're just stuck with it and make the best of it you can. So I don't think it's inevitable, but when you look around, the state of the world and our country tells you that we've got a multiplicity of crises. They haven't just happened by chance, just by nature, like when a thunderstorm suddenly claps over your head. These are all made by human beings. And if they're made by human beings, they can be changed by human beings. It's your job and our job as socialists and members of a party, proud to be who we are, to persuade people that there is a different and better way. And that's where we've got to get to. And so I've always kept hope alive all my life. Occasionally it's been bad, you know, sometimes it's been very bad. I think of when Mrs. Thatcher was in power. I was elected onto Leeds City Council as a councillor in Beeston, which you will know because you're a Leeds lad, in 1984. It was in the middle of the miners' strike.
Yeah, after Sky.
I can tell you things were bad. And then I became leader of Leeds, one of the largest councils in Europe, actually, but I think the second largest at that time in England anyway. And I was the leader when Mrs. Thatcher brought in the poll tax, which you'll have heard of. And it was dreadful. It was shocking. But I kept hope alive. So things have been bad before, and probably there will be again, but we can fight. We can fight for what we believe in. And eventually, I think we will win.
That's a lovely little summation, that. And I'll just do a little follow-up. I have a favourite socialist philosopher, and his name's Edward Bernstein, who was a German. And he took the view that, like yourself, socialism isn't inevitable. But in ideological terms, the way to get there was to convince people politically and electorally, and that although radicalism is valid, you want to go through the route social democracy, and then people start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, as they did with serfdom. So do you think that fundamental critique of we take our steps, but they're big steps, do you think that is a valid way of bringing about socialism in the 21st century?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Bernstein, right in the 1880s, was the first so-called revisionist philosophy of socialism. I don't actually agree with everything he said, but it's very interesting to read him. And clearly, the German Social Democratic Party, our sister party, was set up long before we were. And it's very interesting to see that it's quite, it's gone down to quite a small level now in Germany. I keep in touch with German politics. But yeah, in the end, we live in a country where change can be big changes. You can take big steps forward. But, to get to, on a journey of 1,000 miles, you've stopped the first step. That's kind of the truth. And I think, Labour over the years has done a lot of things when it's been in government, which have been helpful. Not everything. I didn't agree with the war. It was a very difficult time when we went to war with Iraq. But, there's been a lot of good things being done. And my only thing about it all is occasionally, people don't realize it was Labour that did hit, and I think we should be getting the message out more strongly to people that these were Labour achievements, some of the things which people take for granted. Yes, so I think you're right.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay, speaking of the Labour Party, you may have seen the polls which show that young people are becoming more disinterested with the Labour Party, going to the Greens and some even Liberal Democrat. What do you think that the Labour Party need to do to recapture the fire and support from younger voters?
Well, you've got to inspire people. How do you do that? You can probably go ask your next question, but you've got to inspire people. My view is a big vision about the kind of world we live in and the kind of world we could live in. You hope that people, when they're young, starting out in life, will be inspired by, somebody saying, we can do better than this. And it's when, as you get older in life and you get probably tied down with a million things, keeping work, having kids, grandkids, whatever it might be, you're managing life. When you're starting off as a young person, hopefully you can see the bigger picture. And I just say this to younger people, we've made a mess of it, my generation. We haven't come out of this very well. We did some things right. We did a lot of things not right. And younger people have got to take up the cudgels, got to show that they understand that the world can't go on. The planet's burning. There's people starving. All the problems that we've got, there's still racism, homophobia and transphobia and all those things which have got to be contested. And my hope is that young people, and I know this is the case, younger people are progressive. They do want a better world. And I think so, this is important. And this conversation tonight, to me, is important too. And I'm glad that you two and everybody else in the party who are young are engaging, trying to change things, but just this week, we've seen the figures come out for youth unemployment. I mean, it's shocking. It's now 10% more than in my constituency. I'll just get the figures on my screens. I think we're almost double the number of young people in my constituency who are out of work than there are in the constituency of the Tory MP that's responsible for, work and pensions. It's almost double because it doesn't impact everywhere the same. There is a class dimension to our society. It's not simply about generational differences, it's also about class. And my area, which was a coal mining area, And in fact, across the north, wherever there's a post-industrial community, it hits badly. So yeah, there are 745 people in my constituency of working age who haven't got a job. And, a significant number of them, not in education either, just there. Now, how can that be right? You're starting out on life, you're growing up as a kid, you're going to school, full of hope for the future, for you, and then you're at work by the Tories. And that ain't right. We've got to fight it. So I would think one of the things you'll be doing is wondering about how you can fight for the right to work for every young person or to be in full-time education. There are 311,000 people under 24 out of work in our country, nearly a third of a million. I mean, it's wrong morally, but it's also stupid economically, because those people could be in work. They could be helping to create, more economic activity, paying tax and all the other things that they feeling integrated in society rather than sitting at home, worrying themselves, and the families worrying about them. And then we know that if you can get into mischief, it happened once or twice. I must admit, I might have done that more than once in my life. We've got to get these people back to work. So yeah, I mean, this is really quite an important thing. I think I may have got the figures quite right. I've got another 356,000 people aged 16 to 24, neither in work nor in education. So it's more than a third of a million. Now that is, it's not good enough. They are the latest figures from Tuesday of this week.
Oh, that is tragic. It reminds me of, and I know Josh will remember as well, when the A-level results came out last year and the GCSE results came out last year, and it was all based on postcodes and everything. And so I think you're right that there is a fundamental class divide. But I mean, when it comes to it, the party's saying the right things, but we're not, in my view, we've got to do more. And one thing that I do think was right, definitely about the last couple of manifestos, was the actual material and the substance itself. I mean, granted that individually, at least, the policies were popular. I mean, as a group, you can say whatever you want, but they were popular because they resonated with the issues of the day. And so I hope what you said in terms of inspiring is borne out, because for all we know, we could have an election in 2023. It's borne out in policy when the time is right,
Well, what I feel is I feel that most of the problems facing the country and facing the planet too can't be resolved by right-wing solutions. All they can do is make a continued mess, probably make things worse. Look at what's happening in Brazil with the rainforests. I think it was on the telly, I think it might have been last night, or was it today? An uprising of indigenous people in Brazil, because what have they done? The right-wing president there is now saying that they can go in and exploit the big companies, the land which those indigenous people is theirs. And all I can see, if you think about Trump and the things he was doing, you have to laugh, but he was actually deadly serious. The right wing are not resolving the problems facing our planet, and the Tories are making it worse in terms of the NHS, the economy. We've talked about young people trying to get back to work. Right wing solutions, based on populist ideas about race and gender and sexuality, all these kind of things, they don't solve the problems of the world. Only the left and the centre left can do that. So, I think. I take responsibility for the whole of my generation, but I also think, well, a lot of our generation voted for right-wing governments. Well, I never did. I never will.
Yeah. Well, that was a brilliant question by Josh and a brilliant answer too. And I actually had an order for my questions, but you touched on something I want to bring forward. It was about the populist point, and it's why do you think populism, especially from the right, has been so successful, and should we as the left adopt it, or should we try and defeat it with bigger and better ideas?
Well, first of all, It's very difficult to say exactly how this has happened. I've thought a lot about it. I represent a community which has been, we call it being held back by society. So I represent 23 villages. More or less all of them had a pit, a coal mine at one stage. Now, obviously coal is old technology and it's not done much for the planet, but people had a job, they had certainty, they knew what they were, they got a sense of pride from the fact that they were providing power to the country, heat and light. You had a pride in who you were, what you came from, and so on and so forth. I worked in the building industry. I used to help to build houses and flats which people would live in 250 years' time, maybe long after I was gone. And I was proud about that. But a lot of the industries were destroyed very quickly by all sorts of things, Thatcher, globalization and financialization of the economy. People lost a sense of purpose and direction in too many communities. In Bermudas, where you are, I lived in Aerials. They're just around the corner from you, where my kids were born. There was one factory, Burton's. It employed like 5,000 or 6,000 people at Burton's. You probably know it because it's not far from where you live. And the sense of pride, you know, half the men in the country wore a suit made in Leeds after the war. It's amazing. And those suits went across to India, all over what was then the empire, became the Commonwealth. There was a sense of pride in who you were. It's all been lost. And I don't feel that anything yet has been able to replace the sense of purpose, of direction, of power, of agency. You know, doing something worthwhile, building ships in the shipyards, creating steel to help construct, you know, a new world. Those kind of things gave working class people a sense of who they were, where they're coming from, and it's gone. People are looking around for an answer. They're looking around for a solution. The right wing gives simple answers. The right wing populists give simple answers to complex problems. So that's what's happened, and you know, it's disastrous. So wages have fallen significantly. You know, the share of wealth going to the richest 1,000 people is extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. There are 11.5 million people who've been on furlough. 11.5 million, most of them in low-paid jobs. When you're on furlough, you're already on a low-paid job. You're then only on 4/5 of what you were earning. You're stuck at home. You're not working. All of these kind of problems, unemployment we've touched on. It seems to me simple solutions to complex problems is what the right have offered. We have to explain right-wing solutions don't work. They've been tried and tested and failed, and we have to show a way forward. But however, and it has been said to me that we'll call them ordinary folk, though nobody's ordinary, but do you know what I mean? Fall for lies easier than educated people. I don't believe that for a minute, not for a second. Some of the most intelligent people. By the way, I worked in Number 10.
Yeah.
I watched in Number 10 with Gordon Brown. But I'll say this, some of the most intelligent and bright and lively people I ever met worked on building sites with no qualifications at all. So I don't accept the idea that, you know, those people are just capable of being deceived. But they're people looking for an answer, they're looking for a solution. Now, if we can find ways of expressing simply, you know, in our language, the language of the streets, not like with Sanders, or we've just come out of an Oxford seminar of politics or something like that. You know, we can win. We can win the argument. We can pull people across. So if you want to call that left populism, fine. I don't have a problem with that. And some people said, well, what we did under Jeremy, I was one of the first people to nominate Jeremy to be leader. We said we want a society that works for the many, not just for the few, because the key cleavage in our society is between the richest few and the vast bulk of ordinary people who have got quite a lot of people have got difficulties economically and financially. That's the key cleavage. The key cleavage isn't between, say, heterosexual and gay people, or between, I don't know, white people and people of color. The key cleavage, that is not the key cleavage. So if we can explain it in that kind of language, we've got a chance, it seems to me, of winning. So yeah, I think there's quite a lot of learned books. There's a very interesting book called About Left Populism by a friend of mine who's called Chantal Mouffe. And it's a very interesting book. I read it, I've spoken to her, I've been on platforms with her. And, you know, she's got some interesting ideas about trying to build a left populism. And it's worth looking at, it seems to me.
Brilliant.
But without talking down to people, you know, without talking down to people as though we're cleverer than they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, I think, brilliant. Thank you.
Sorry, I think I interrupted you.
You know, when you speak of inspiration, providing ideas for people, especially young people, as you said before, now the Labour today have launched their new policy programme consultation, Stronger Together. What are the 3 policies that matter to you deeply and that you would like to see on their policy programme for the future?
Well, what I think is, I mean, over the years, I've become more and more interested in economics, the economy, because I think that's the key to so much. So I suppose I'm interested in economics, and I'd like to see full employment, you know, people on proper wages, people treated with respect at work, and then to, you know, part-time working, all those kind of things, which so many people, drudgery at work. But when I think, you know, I could probably give you 5 or 6 quick economic points. Full employment seems to me important. But what's underlying it is really the drive towards equality. Now, equality is not the same as being identical. You know, we're all different. We've all got, you know, amazing talents within every single human being does. So we're not all the same, but you can have a society that's much more equal, which treats everybody with respect. And I think that is a fundamental, or one of the key fundamental values which underpin any policy proposal which you want to emerge. If you think about it, when you come to the issues of identity and of minority groups, they all boil down to equality, whether you treat trans people with respect, or gay people, or women, or black people, people of different religions. It's the fundamental human right of every one of us to be treated by society's social arrangements to give an equal treatment, equal respect for all. So that, I think, underlies it. But there's a second thing, which I think is an important value for the left, and that's, there's different ways of expressing it. In the French Revolution, they talked about fraternity, but that's male dominated. We could talk about community or solidarity, the sense of you look after me and I look after you. I always talk about there's like a chain, like we're all linked together. If I care for somebody, then they care for somebody else, and that person then cares for 2 other people, and so on, so that, you know, we look after each other. So equality and community are the underlying values. Now, achieving equality seems to be easier to say what policies you might adopt. You know, don't allow people to become billionaires without proper redistribution mechanisms. Community and cohesion, building cohesion back, is more difficult, but that's an abiding Labour value too. So, as is liberty, by the way. So, yeah, they're the underlying principles, and we have to understand them, because down the street there's an elderly lady. And she grew up in the village that I now live in, and she went to school, and she's a widow, and there's quite a few other people that have been widowed, all went to school together, you know, like 60 years, 70 years ago. And the blooming Tories have cut the community facilities so that they can't get together in one place. Obviously, it's different now because of COVID, and talk about the old days and talk about what's gone wrong and what's gone right, and, you know, what's happening to my little grandson or my great grandkids or whatever. You know, just those little things which allow people to be together in communities. But what I feel is, like, if it's heavy snow, I will go down there with a shovel and, you know, shovel it out, because that's what community is. But if she's got a brain tumor, then I will help to pay, as we all will, for a brain specialist to look after. And this is why the NHS expresses our values of community as well as equality. And I feel horses for courses, we should structure society which enhances community, not tears it up. So when the pits closed in the area I represent, the communities were ravaged, completely ravaged. Nothing was put in its place. They were just abandoned. people turn to for a time to drugs and all sorts of other difficult times, mental health issues and all the rest of it emerged. You know, it's wrong that you should just tear up the communities in the way that was done in the 1980s. I ducked your question there, but I kind of tried to give you an answer as best as I could.
Yeah.
Politician.
Good though. It's good though.
Sorry about that.
Do you want to have any follow-ups, Josh? Or?
Well, yeah, when you're talking about community and sort of speaking sort of like in an ordinary way or something like that,
yeah.
Obviously the policies were popular in 2019, and also the nation enjoys a lot of socialist things like the NHS, you know, the welfare state, national minimum wage, etc. So do you think the label socialism somehow scaring people or perceived to scare people, especially in the media?
I don't think it's right simply to blame the media for everything. I mean, we've got to ask whether we told our story in a way it's understandable, in language which people can relate to, you know, with regional accents, not using words which are based in Latin or something like that, like we've just come out of an Oxford seminar. But the thing is this, it seems to me socialism is really about what human beings are. And I just want to just take a couple of minutes to explain why I think this. If you go back to the emergence of Homo sapiens, the species which we're all animals, aren't we? We are Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens developed over tens of thousands of years in very dangerous circumstances. This is important if you just follow the argument for a second. So whether it was hunting for meat against dangerous animals, or whether it was domesticating the cats or the dogs or the food that we eat like cattle and so on, we had to cooperate to survive. And this is how the human species developed. It's only a few thousand years since we learned how to read, and it's not that long since we learned how to speak, to communicate, you know, orally with each other and to write and so on. But it's hundreds of thousands of years of development. Now, why am I saying all that? It's because our species developed over time, as Darwin describes all species, to be a social animal. One depends on the rest, and each one of those depends on the rest of us. And this hard wiring of the human mind and our spirit, if you like, our soul, is important. Now, what is Thatcher saying? What did Thatcher say? She said, the point is not the economics. The point is to change men's souls. Men. I think she said men. We would talk about all human beings, not just men, but to change men's souls. She wanted it to become an individualized society. She said there's no such thing as society. We're all individuals in a war, each against all the rest, to get further up the ladder or whatever it can be like that. That is against who we are as human beings. It's not us as a species. And so you're not going to go to a local pub and give that tale to the guy who's having on his third pint of Guinness. But like, it seems to me that you're cutting with the grain of what human beings are. If you talk about us being social, and social is the first part of the word socialism. So like I've just described the elderly lady down the road, if I can help her, if I can pay a bit more tax so she goes to get the best possible surgeon in the world, if she has it, or if we can provide a local community centre in the library, that is what we're about. Because one day, perhaps quite soon in my case, I'm going to be needing facilities provided by society. Luckily, I haven't had that much many problems in my life. I've been relatively self-sufficient, but I don't kid myself that I'm on my own in a war against everybody else. So, yeah, socialism has been made a bogey word, but actually it's bloody ridiculous that we've allowed it to happen. But if you just talk, as I said, in long words and complicated language on the telly or wherever, you know, it's not going to work. So let me tell you my story that I've told a lot of times about the bamboo sticks. Have you heard it? No. Right. Imagine you're 8 years old. your granddad's always talking about trade unions and socialism and labour and all this kind of stuff. And you say to your granddad, Granddad, what's all this? What's a trade union? I don't get it. What are you talking about? So he says to you, look, I'll tell you what, let's go in the backyard, I'll show you. So you go through the house into the backyard, he's got a bit of allotment there. And he says, go and get those old bamboo canes over there that I've used for my tomatoes. So you go, you're 8-year-old, you go and pick them all. Here they are, Granddad, here we are. He says, right, get one of them and snap it. So being a big hero, you snap the bamboo stick. There you are. He said, right. He said, now, there's 12 of them. I've counted. Get them 12 in your hands and snap them. Well, you can't. You can't do it. And still to this day, I don't think you could do it because they're pliable, but they mutually reinforce each other's strength. Very hard to break 12 bamboo sticks. You can bend them, you can't break them. And I tried this not long ago because I've got some tomatoes in my garden. And what did he say? He said, he said, is socialism because they can break you if you're on your own, but they cannot break you if you stick together. And that is the best explanation I've come across that explains the nature of how we are now. It's not a perfect example of socialism, but we've got to tell stories like that, which can put the message straight across. Now, you'll have grandkids one day, you two. Remember that tale and tell it to your grandkids. Don't forget
that.
Yeah.
Don't forget, it's a good story.
And
it's true, by the way. Go find some canes and try to do it.
Well, I tell you, John, after hearing that, you're obviously very clued up on your values, thoughts, and ideas, and obviously we all get them from our own places. I mean, I'm a practicing Catholic, not in the trad way, in the sense that in a more liberal way. And I get my socialist values from what I see as socialist teachings of Jesus, and everyone gets them from everywhere. But that leads me to the question: what socialist philosophers and thinkers influenced your politics and how you see the world?
Well, I worked in the building industry, as I've just told you. My granddad, my dad were plumbers, heating engineers. My brother was. And there's a great book called Ragged Trousered Philanthropist, which, though it's quite old now, is utterly brilliant, and everybody should read it. Whatever your politics are, you should read it. The Ragged Trousered Philanthropist. The author died. Nobody knew where he was until they found him in a pauper's grave, unmarked, not so long ago. But it's a great book. But yeah, most of our ideas I picked up as a young boy, really, from listening to people around me. I got into reading books. I left school when I was 15. I was told that I wasn't going to succeed, and I left school before the school leaving age. Actually, when I was 15, I left with no real qualifications of any meaning. But I began to think about what had happened to me and people around me, and I began to see what was going on in the world. I could see what was happening at work, and I thought there's got to be a better word than this. And I began reading. So I read everything, really. Later on, I read Marx, but you can read. There's lots of stuff. William Morris. There's lots of stuff. But the Ragged Trousered Philanthropist, yeah, that's a good one. Funny enough, I'm not really religious, but thinking about the Bible, I worked with number 10 for Gordon Brown in the middle of all that crash, one thing and another. And I often used to say to him, look, there's a great story in the Bible. You've got a guy laying on the ground, seriously ill. There's a guy there's several people walk past him. And then there's a guy walking down the street from a different racial group. And there've been the man on the ground, the man walking, there've been racism, as I describe it now, between those two communities. And what does he do? He says, I can't walk by and not help. So he goes across the road to help. And I said to Gordon, Gordon's the son of a minister, a really Christian minister, as you probably know. That is a great story. And when people say, well, the unemployed, they're all rough and, you know, they don't deserve it, or whenever people say these things about other groups, you know, this comes from the Bible. This is one of the founding texts of, you know, the dominant religion in our society for the last few centuries, whether it's Methodist, Catholic, or whatever. And he used that story quite a lot, and it does work, because it explains, you know, the difference between one human being and another are less important than the common humanity which we all share. And you should reach out and help others, because one day you will need help. You know, in life we all do from time to time. So don't dismiss, and I'll show you, I know you're not dismissing or be embarrassed or anything else. And I'm glad you said what you said about your Catholicism. It's important to you, it's who you are, and it's led you to a view that's the teachings of the church. All churches, in my opinion, are quite, you know, you can get one religion saying one thing, which is great, and the same religion saying something which is not so great. But the social teachings of the Catholic Church it seem to me to have been very progressive. And, you know, some of the other stuff less so, I'm afraid, but we won't get into the disagreements on this.
Yeah, to tell you what, you're exactly right, really. And I mean, if any institution progresses slowly, it's certainly the Catholic Church. But, you know,
well, it's been around a while.
Yeah, you're right, though. And that was the Good Samaritan story you pointed out. And exactly right. And it does bring me back, and I'll be very, very brief on this, to a story. Ironically, you also kind of referenced it in a previous story you just told. My grandfather was a trade unionist, and he's from Northern Ireland. And as a Catholic, he did see himself as Irish at the time. And I guess, you know, that kind of does run in the family. But yeah, at the time, he moved over here, and he was working in a factory. And his black co-workers were getting, even though he was Irish, he was still white. And this was in the time of no blacks, no Irish. And they were getting such pittance pay. It was ridiculous. You know, they used to come in on a cycle in the house. They had one common sleeping room on the floor where every 8 hours, one would wake up and go to work and then come home, and then the other one would go out. And it was with his trade union fighting that he was able to secure fair pay for those people and fair hours. And it was only years later, once they got back on their feet from the pay that they got from his action, they came and knocked at my grandma's door, and they says, is Mr. Frankie? And they had this lovely basket of fruits and veg and all this fresh stuff from the market. And they says, we want to say thank you. And, you know, stories like that, it really does show.
Great story. You should be proud of your granddad. I know you are. That's a great story, because here's the thing, though. They want to split us all up into single bamboo canes. They want each one of us separate, because then they can break us. If you get together, it's the start of a new society. If you allow yourselves to be divided, you can be broken. And this is what happens too often. So I think what we're saying is the same thing in different ways with different stories. And I believe telling stories, and it's what Jesus did. Though I hasten to add, I don't have a religion, but he told stories which had meaning, didn't he? Yeah. And I think, that's quite an important, be able to tell stories which reinforce the message, because that, I think, is the way to win socialists. I remember, I'm sorry I'm going off on one now, but anyway, it's good to tell stories. So I remember meeting the Bishop of Pontefract, and he was blessing a mine that had been closed and the men that had died underground. And I talked to him afterwards, and I said, well, I'm not really one of you, really, but it's nice to meet you. And he said, I'll tell you something now. He said, he'd been watching a film on video the night before, and it were about a group of soldiers who were in Normandy, I think they were, I can't remember. And they heard that the mother of eight soldiers, there was only one of them left. All the brothers had died except that one. And what did they do? They decided, knowing that they could be killed, to go and try to save that last brother for the sake of a mother that they'd never even met. And he said, the capacity of human beings to do something so courageous, knowing it could end up in death, but for other human beings, is what he said the Christian idea is about. And I think it's just that aspect of it. And I said, look, I can't disagree with that. Do you know which film it was, Josh?
I've not got a clue.
Saving Private Ryan.
Was it? My uncle was in that, actually.
No.
Yeah, he
No.
was. Yeah.
Have you ever watched it? You've got to watch it.
You know what? I will. I haven't actually watched it, but it's a fun little family story. Oh,
you need to watch it because by the way, I've never seen it either, but this bishop fellow, he kind of persuaded me. He said Christ died for others to live, and I said, I've got no, don't give me that, I can't handle that. But I said the idea that human beings are quite capable of acting in a way which is not purely altruistic, that's not just about me, which is the capitalist idea in my opinion, but of operating in a way which is in the wider interest of humanity, is a right one. And of course, people went to war to fight fascism in defense of the Jews and other people who were being killed by the Nazis. So, you know, this is who we are. This is who we are. These are our values. And I think, like, you know, you've got me talking too much now. We'll shut up. Here's another one. Make it an easy one. You're making it hard, this interview.
Right. I think it's actually your question, Josh, if I'm right.
Yeah, no problem. This should be a quick and easy one. Do you think that the Labour Party will be the party of government in 2024?
If I'm honest with you, I don't know. I mean, we've got a massive, I think we've got to be honest, we've got a massive hill to climb. I think we can be, and we should be. The question is, will we be? That, I think, I'm not going to have you coming back in 2024 and interview me and say, you told us wrong, John. So I think you've got to try to tell the truth.
Yeah.
Sometimes politicians give politicians answers and avoid the question. But the first thing is most often, and I hate to say this, but it's probably true, it's governments that lose elections rather than oppositions that win them. The government's, in my view, in much worse difficulty than the media are admitting. I think Boris is, you know, we obviously we're interested in politics, so we watch what's going on. We know this is a serious mess, this government. The country's in very great difficulty. We've had probably 150,000 people who've died. We're now about to enter into what looks like a difficult time with COVID again because of the idiotic decision not to close the borders sooner, out of vanity. And I think that the economy is in worse mess than people are admitting. So the first thing is are the government fit to continue in office whenever the election is? The answer is no. So then it's up to each one of us to persuade people around us at work and neighbours in the pub, you know, relatives, to vote for a different kind of more decent party. So that's our job, and it's up to the leadership then to show, you know, we have a vision. It's a big vision. It's about change. It's better than the one which they've created, the Tories, over the last few years. People on the dole, 14 million people in poverty, so on and so forth. And, you know, I think I'm not part of the leadership. I was from 2008 up to the end of Jeremy. I was sacked by Keir. But anyway, I wasn't too, I did expect him to sack me, by the way. But it's given me time to think. And it's given me time to, you know, refresh the little grey cells if there's any left in here at all. And so I don't complain. But I'm not part of the leadership anymore as I was. A new generation needs to show the way forward. I want Keir's our leader, and therefore we are Labour. We want to see rid of this idiot that's in charge now. That implies we want Keir to be the Prime Minister in due course. But he has a massive job to convince the country that he is the right guy to be Prime Minister. I'd say that the first step is in Batley in a couple of weeks' time. And let's hope we can pull it off. But again, that's quite a difficult thing as well. But yeah, we ought to be in government in 2024. And let's all do whatever we can to try to get there. But that doesn't mean being unprincipled. So if I've got disagreements, I think as long as I express them carefully, I ought to be able to, same as you two as well, and everybody watching this program, you've got to have a debate in the party. You can't run it like a command and control operation from on high. You're sweeping people aside simply because they don't agree with what you're doing. So, yeah.
It's a good answer.
Yeah. I don't have any follow-ups on that. I don't know if you do, Josh, but
no, not really.
I thought, well, that is brilliant, because we have another question here about, well, first of all, just to address one point you made, we have, and obviously there is obviously tumult in politics as ever, but we have led in the polls before, even in the first year, so it's not impossible, it's just really hard. And so, we can't ever hold ourselves back with a mindset that it's impossible to win, and I'm sure that you're as motivated as ever. But we do have a Chesham and Amersham by-election today. And first of all, what do you think the outcome will be, if you can speak on that? And if you can't, what do you think the effect of it will be for not only the government, but for the wider political scene?
Well, we need to see the result. Look, I don't know it very well. I don't think it's a place where Labour's got a very massive, recent history of weighing up the votes in that area. So you can read that any way you want. I'm not going to say anything negative while the polls are still open. People are still voting. I'd urge people to vote Labour. And though this programme may not be shown until after that's out of the way, but look, that's my position. We'll have to see the result. One by-election is a straw in the wind. It might show you the way in which the wind's blowing on that day in a particular part of the country. It isn't a decisive moment. If there's a string of by-election results all over the country in different communities, all of which point in the same direction, then the wind's probably quite strong. And you've got to know, there's an old Bob Dylan song, and it's got a line in it saying, you don't need to be a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. And I think politicians need to have that in mind.
Yeah, that's brilliant, actually.
I will say this, as you know, I'm on the left of the party, and so you will know that I'm on the left of the party, and so I do have strong views, and I'll continue to press them forward. But I've also got a party card in my wallet, and it's the same party card as Keir and everybody else in different wings of the party. It's the one thing that keeps us, which binds us together, or should do. And so we've got to be respectful even when we disagree.
Yeah, that's lovely, and that's a nice little brief answer to that question. I've got nothing to follow up, so Josh, it's yours now.
Perfect. Last question. Speaking of your being on the left of the party, there's a lot of controversy around people's brands of politics, especially on the left. Do you seek the complete abolishment of capitalism, or are you more in favour of having a well-regulated business, some nationalisation, strong welfare?
Well, there's been debates over the century and a bit that we've been a party about exactly where you want to get to. In the party, I think there have been probably three historic trends. There's been the trade unions, who wanted to promote the interests of working people. Then there's been the Social Democrats, who thought you could modify capitalism and deliver equality, a more classless society. And then there have been the Socialists, who think in the end, you are going to have to move on beyond a capitalist society into a socialist society. That's what I think. Personally, I don't think you can reconcile many aspects of a capitalist society with one which is capable of developing strong communities, giving liberty to people, liberty from ill health, from poor education, poverty, and all those other things, and which gives us, allows strong communities to develop, particularly in a globalized economy of the kinds we are now. How we get there, though, is the debate. It's about the ends I'm clear about, it's the means of how we get there. And I think that there are grounds to say that the Social Democrats and the Socialists have got quite a bit in common and can work together. what I find more difficult is those people in the party who basically abandon any pretense that we're about trying to create a more equal society. And the idea that it's okay to be filthy rich when there's people in poverty is not something that appeals to me personally. So I feel less strongly that I've got many bonds with those kind of people, but that's my answer.
Perfect. That's
9 out of 10. 9 out of 10.
Pretty good answer. Thank you. That's all questions from me, and I think it's all from Jobe too. But thank you.
It's very nice to meet you both, and I wish you all well. So I've been around a long time, but it's great to meet young people who are motivated by ideas. And I'm not asking anybody to agree with everything I've done or said. That's not the point. The point is to pass the baton on, to a new generation when our generation finally comes to an end. Remember, I started being in politics, opposing the Vietnam War. So in the mid-1960s. So I've been around a long time. First Labour Party meeting I attended was in 1969, Barbara Castle. So I've been around a long time, and I'm not ready to give it up anytime soon. But I also am well aware that there's generations of people bursting to get out there with their ideas. Your ideas are as valid as mine, and in many ways more valid, because it's your planet and it's your country that we're gonna, you will have custody of it, and you do now. So it's very important, and I'm glad, thank you very much for asking me to come. I'm glad we've been able to exchange a few ideas.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure, especially hearing it from a Leeds lad like yourself.
It's been good to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, see you soon.
See you soon.
All right. Ta-ra.
Take care. Ta-ra.